Sebring in Highlands County has a Redfin median sale price around $245,000. It sits more than 60 miles from the Gulf and more than 90 from the Atlantic. NOAA's historical hurricane track map shows why that matters. No coastal landfall happens here. Winds get here later. Storm surge does not. Insurance filings treat inland Florida differently from beach territory. Days on market run longer. Prices stay lower. You still get Florida sun, hospitals, chain stores, and a real courthouse circle downtown. That is the split a lot of buyers over 55 are trying to sort out right now. They are not asking whether Florida gets hurricanes. It does. They are asking where the landfall record is thinnest, where the wind usually arrives weaker, and what that does to housing numbers you can actually verify. So this list is not about postcard towns. It is about inland towns where NOAA's storm history, Redfin pricing, Zillow values, and Florida insurance filings line up in a very specific way. Here are 11 Florida towns where hurricanes almost never hit directly. This is moving now because the old Florida math changed. County appraisers kept resetting non-homestead values upward after the pandemic run-up. Florida Office of Insurance Regulation filings kept showing pressure on roof age, wind mitigation, and reinsurance. Citizens kept absorbing policies when private carriers pulled back from exposed coastal books. Condo owners saw special assessments after the new structural rules took effect. At the same time, census estimates showed Florida still adding people, but not equally in every county. Buyers started weighing distance from the coast against commute time, hospital access, and monthly carrying costs. The result is visible in public data. In some inland towns, prices held below state medians, homes took a little longer to move, and the insurance conversation sounded very different from Fort Myers Beach or the Barrier Islands. 3 places on this list stand out for different reasons. Sanford in Seminole County sits near Orlando jobs, yet NOAA's track history still looks much thinner than the coast, and Redfin has the median sale price under $400,000. Lake City, up by Interstate 75 and Interstate 10, had a median sale price below $300,000, but a downtown where some blocks are still waiting for the next tenant. And Sebring has one of the strongest low-price inland location combinations in the state, but it also has some of the longest selling times on this list. Those 3 are not next to each other here, and the top spot is not the one most people expect. If you want this channel to keep tracking where Florida is actually moving, stay with it. The point here is not hype. It is to keep matching county rolls, insurance filings, migration data, and sales numbers so you can see which places are changing and which stories are just stories. Number 11, Lake City, Columbia County. Redfin showed the median sale price in Lake City at about $280,000 and median days on market around the high 70s. Zillow's typical home value sits in that same general band, below a lot of peninsula retirement markets. The storm angle is simple. Lake City is inland North Florida, roughly 60 miles from the Gulf and a little under 60 from the Atlantic, and NOAA's historical hurricane tracks show no landfall here because landfall belongs to the coast. By the time systems cross the peninsula or come up from the Gulf, they usually reach Columbia County weaker than they were at the shoreline. That inland position is why Florida Office of Insurance Regulation filings place counties like this outside the highest coastal wind exposure bands. The reason the housing numbers stay moderate is not only weather. Lake City is a highway town. Interstate 10 and Interstate 75 cross here. HCA Florida Lake City Hospital is close to downtown. The county's job base leans on logistics, healthcare, schools, and distribution, not one giant employer. That keeps demand steady, but not frantic. If you drive through, you notice the old core around Marion Avenue and the courthouse. Some storefronts are occupied, some still are not. This is not a resort market. It is a practical inland service town, and the data reads that way. Lower than many coastal prices, longer selling times. A hurricane map that looks much quieter than Jacksonville Beach or Panama City. Number 10, Ocala, Marion County. Redfin put Ocala's median sale price near $285,000, with median days on market around the low 60s. Zillow's typical home value has also stayed well below many Southeast Florida markets. NOAA's track map shows the same inland pattern you want to see for this topic. Ocala is more than 70 miles from the Atlantic and close to that from the Gulf, with no hurricane landfall because it is deep enough inland that storms arrive after crossing land. That does not remove wind risk. It does thin the direct hit record. In Florida Office of Insurance Regulation filings, inland counties like Marion sit in a very different conversation from the coasts when carriers talk wind exposure. The reason Ocala holds demand better than smaller inland towns is jobs and roads. Interstate 75 runs right by it. HCA Florida Ocala Hospital and Advent Health Ocala anchor healthcare. The equine industry is real here, and the World Equestrian Center added another demand layer that did not exist at this scale a decade ago. You can see it in the spread between older central neighborhoods and new construction farther southwest. Downtown around the square has restaurants, offices, and active storefronts. Then a few miles away, it turns into subdivisions, medical buildings, and wide arterial roads fast. This is one of the clearer examples of the inland Florida trade. You give up the beach, you keep a substantial regional economy. You also get housing prices that, by Redfin and Zillow data, still land in a range many retirees can at least put on a spreadsheet. Number 9. Clermont, Lake County. Redfin showed a median sale price around $450,000 in Clermont, with days on market near the mid-50s. That price is much higher than Sebring or Lake City, but the weather record is still why it makes this list. Clermont sits on the Central Florida Ridge, about 80 miles from either coast depending on the route, and NOAA's historical hurricane tracks show the same inland reality. No landfall here. Storms weaken crossing the state. Florida insurance filings separate this kind of interior exposure from beachfront wind territory for a reason. You still insure for hurricane wind in Florida. You are just not sitting in the first strike zone. What drives Clermont's higher number is Orlando spillover. South 27, the Turnpike, and jobs in West Orange County all feed this market. South Lake Hospital, now part of Orlando Health, is right there. Census population estimates for Lake County kept moving up over the last several years, and Clermont has been one of the county's pressure points because people can still reach Metro Orlando from here. The place itself feels more built than many inland towns on this list. Downtown by Montrose Street and Victory Point is active. Waterfront trails and newer retail keep it from reading like a sleepy courthouse town. The trade-off is visible in the data. Lower direct hurricane exposure than the coasts, yes. Lower price than Winter Park, yes. Cheap, no. If your first filter is minimizing direct landfall history, Clermont works. If your first filter is price, it drops behind several towns still to come. If you want the longer version of this screening process, the Florida Buy and Avoid list is built exactly the same way as this video. It is a buy and avoid list with 20 Florida towns worth a closer look and 20 that raise more red flags in the county records, pricing trends, and insurance data. Same public sources, same ground rules, one place to compare them. But stay right here, because the towns above this one are the ones that surprised me. Number 8, Gainesville, Alachua County. Redfin had Gainesville's median sale price around $305,000 and median days on market near the upper 50s. That is a university city price, not a coast price. NOAA's historical tracks again tell the core story. Gainesville is roughly 70 miles from the Gulf and more than 60 from the Atlantic, well inland, with no hurricane landfall. Big storms can still come through with rain, trees down, and power loss. But the direct coastal strike pattern is thinner here than in St. Augustine, Cedar Key, or Tampa Bay. That matters when insurers and buyers think about wind. The reason Gainesville holds up differently from a lot of inland towns is the University of Florida. UF Health Shands, the university itself, and public sector employment make this a deep labor market by North Florida standards. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has long shown the Gainesville Metro with a major education and health services share. That stabilizes demand even when state-level housing slows. It also means you are not looking at a classic retiree-only town. You are looking at a mixed market with students, faculty, medical staff, and year-round residents all competing in different bands. The place feels that way on the ground. University Avenue is busy. Midtown changes tenant mix all the time. Downtown around Main Street has active blocks and older buildings still waiting on their next use. For this list, Gainesville is not the cheapest and not the quietest. It is here because the hurricane map is lighter than the coasts, while the job base is stronger than most inland alternatives. Number 7. Winter Haven, Polk County. Redfin showed Winter Haven's median sale price around $310,000, with median days on market in the 60s. Zillow's typical home value has stayed close to that middle Florida range, below many Gulf Coast retirement centers. Polk County is central enough that NOAA's hurricane track history again works in its favor for this specific list.
Winter Haven is about 55 miles from Tampa Bay, and around the same from the Atlantic side, inland enough that no hurricane landfall happens here, and most systems arrive after running over land. In insurance terms, that does not erase risk. It usually softens the first-order wind exposure compared with open coast addresses. The reason Winter Haven's market keeps moving is position. South 27 and the Polk Parkway tying into larger employment sheds. Winter Haven Hospital is close to downtown. Legoland, Florida is in the city, which matters more for service employment than for home values by itself, but it keeps traffic and retail active. Downtown around Central Avenue and the historic theater has more life than people expect. Then, a few minutes out, you hit lakes, ranch lots, and a lot of post-war housing stock. This town often gets overlooked because Lakeland takes the bigger headlines in Polk County. But the numbers are worth noting. The median price is still below much of coastal Florida. Days on market are not ultra-tight. And if your concern is direct hurricane strike history, the NOAA map is a lot thinner here than Sarasota, Naples, or St. Petersburg. Number 6. Sanford, Seminole County. Redfin put Sanford's median sale price around $390,000, with days on market around the upper 40s. That is not low by inland standards, but it is lower than several coastal suburbs with a much heavier storm profile. NOAA's historical hurricane tracks show the same pattern as the rest of this list. Sanford is well inland from the Atlantic, near the north side of Metro Orlando, so there is no hurricane landfall here. Storms that reach Seminole County generally do it after crossing coastline and land. Florida Office of Insurance Regulation filings reflect that inland versus coastal distinction, even though every Florida homeowner still knows wind coverage is part of the monthly math. The number is where it is because Sanford gets Orlando access without Orlando pricing. Interstate 4, State Road 417, and the airport all help. Orlando Sanford International Airport is not Orlando International, but it matters to the local economy. HCA Florida Lake Monroe Hospital is nearby. Seminole County Public Schools also show up repeatedly in relocation searches, and that supports demand. The place itself has two different faces. Historic downtown Sanford along First Street, by the marina and brick storefronts, feels older and walkable. Then the wider suburban grid farther west feels like metro spillover. This is not a hidden cheap town. It is a strategic inland one. Redfin's days on market figure shows houses still move, and the inland storm record helps explain why some buyers keep looking here after they cross beachside communities off the list. Number 5. The Villages, Sumter County. Redfin showed median sale prices in the Villages around the upper 300s, roughly $370,000, with days on market around the low 50s. NOAA's hurricane history is the key to why this giant retirement market belongs here. Sumter County is inland central Florida. No hurricane landfall occurs here. The storms that reach it have already crossed the state or come up from the Gulf interior. That thinner, direct hit pattern is one reason the insurance conversation here sounds different from Naples, Cape Coral, or the Keys, even though roofs, age, and deductibles still matter in every Florida county. The reason the prices stay higher than Sebring or Lake City is obvious in the scale. The Villages is not just one town center. It is a master-planned regional market with health facilities, golf infrastructure, retail, and internal demand already built in. Turnpike access helps. UF Health, the Villages Hospital, and other nearby medical facilities matter.
Public data from census estimates shows the surrounding counties have been among the strongest growth stories in inland Florida. That supports resale activity even when the rest of the state slows. The place itself looks like a system more than a town. Spanish Springs and Lake Sumter Landing are active commercial nodes, not sleepy main streets. If you are sorting only by hurricane landfall history, this market scores well. If you are sorting by affordability, it lands in the middle of this list, not the bottom. Lower coastal exposure does not automatically mean low housing cost when demand is this organized. Number 4. Lakeland, Polk County.
Redfin had Lakeland's median sale price around $320,000, with median days on market in the low 50s. Zillow's typical value also sits well under many Southwest Florida coastal markets. NOAA's track history looks familiar by now. Lakeland is Central Peninsula, Florida. There is no landfall here. Storms weaken over land before reaching it from either side. That does not prevent damage in every storm season, but it does thin the direct strike record compared with barrier islands and shoreline cities. In insurer language, inland wind is simply a different file than open coast wind. The reason Lakeland ranks this high is the combination of jobs, roads, and price. Interstate 4 puts it between Tampa and Orlando. Publix is headquartered here. Lakeland Regional Health is a major medical anchor. The city is large enough to function as its own employment center, not just a bedroom market. That helps absorb slower statewide housing periods. Downtown around Munn Park has banks, restaurants, old offices, and civic buildings that still give it a real center. A few corridors are polished. A few are not. You can still read the older industrial and rail city under the newer apartment and warehouse growth. This is one of the strongest data combinations in inland Florida. The median price is not the lowest, but it is still moderate by state standards. Days on market are manageable, and the hurricane landfall history is about as thin as you can ask for without leaving Florida altogether. Number 3. Tavares, Lake County. Redfin showed Tavares with a median sale price around $340,000 and days on market around the mid-60s. It is not a huge sample market every month, so the exact number moves around, but the broader picture is stable. Tavares is inland, on the chain of lakes northwest of Orlando, and NOAA's historical hurricane track map shows no landfall here. Storms can still cross the peninsula and push heavy rain into Lake County. The direct first strike history is still much thinner than Volusia's beaches or the Gulf Coast south of Tampa. That inland position shows up in how people compare monthly ownership costs, especially after a few years of insurance sticker shock elsewhere. The reason Tavares stands out is that it feels like a county seat with water access instead of a giant suburb. Advent Health Waterman is right in town. South 441 and State Road 19 keep it connected. Lake County's growth over the last several census estimate cycles has kept pressure on nearby towns, but Tavares still trades below some of the more polished Orlando orbit markets. On the ground, downtown by Wooten Park and the county offices is small but active, with restaurants, city buildings, and event space facing the lake. It does not read like a resort strip. It reads like a working inland town that happened to keep its waterfront. For buyers who care first about the hurricane map, and second about being in a place with hospital access and civic infrastructure, the numbers here deserve attention. Number 2. Leesburg, Lake County. Redfin put Leesburg's median sale price around $310,000, with days on market in the upper 60s. Zillow's typical value is in the same broad range, noticeably below many coastal retirement markets. NOAA's storm history again explains the appeal. Leesburg is deep inland in central Florida. There is no hurricane landfall here, and storms that reach it usually do so after spending energy over land. Florida insurance filings do not pretend inland Florida is risk-free, but they do draw a clear line between places like this and shoreline zip codes where wind and surge are the opening event, not the after effect. The reason Leesburg rises this high is value plus function. UF Health Leesburg Hospital is a major practical asset. S27 and the Turnpike connection keep Orlando, Clermont, and the villages within reach. Lake County's growth has lifted the whole area,
But Leesburg still prices below Clermont and below many age-targeted communities. Downtown around Main Street and the old commercial blocks has more vacancies than Mount Dora, but it also has banks, local shops, and the bones of a real historic center. Outside downtown, you get a lot of older subdivisions, medical offices, chain retail, and lakeside neighborhoods. In plain numbers, this is one of the better inland trade-offs in the state.
Moderate price, manageable days on market, thin direct hurricane record, not no risk, just a very different risk pattern from homes exposed at the shoreline. Number 1, Sebring, Highlands County. Redfin showed Sebring's median sale price around $245,000 and median days on market around the low 70s. Zillow's typical home value sits in that same affordable inland range. For this specific title, the geography is hard to beat. Sebring sits on the Lake Wales Ridge, more than 60 miles from the Gulf and roughly 90 from the Atlantic. NOAA's historical hurricane track map shows why the town keeps coming up in inland storm discussions. No hurricane landfall occurs here. Storms can arrive, and some have arrived hard enough to knock down trees and power. But they arrive inland, not off open water and not with storm surge. That is the cleanest distinction in Florida. The reason Sebring tops the list is not only the hurricane record, it is the combination of that record with price. Highlands County stays cheaper than a lot of Central Florida. Advent Health Sebring gives the area a serious hospital anchor. South 27 carries the local traffic spine. Sebring International Raceway brings intermittent activity, but this is not a boomtown economy. That is part of why days on market run longer. Buyers have more time. On the ground, downtown around the Circle is one of the more recognizable old Florida centers in the state, with a round street plan, civic buildings, and a mix of occupied storefronts and slower blocks. If you screen Florida towns first by thin landfall history, then by price, Sebring is the one that keeps surviving the cuts. If one town on this list is worth a serious look in the data, it is Sebring. Not because it is perfect, because the public numbers line up unusually well. The hurricane landfall history is thin, the median price stays lower than many inland peers, and the town still has the basics people actually use, especially hospital access, a recognizable downtown, and a road network that makes daily life workable. Tell me which of these towns you have actually lived in or driven through. Say it plainly in the comments. Whichever place comes up most is the one I will cover next, with the county records, the sales data, and the insurance filings open. The next episode is the opposite map. It is the Florida coast where the pressure is thickest, from the September 28, 2022 landfall of Hurricane Ian to the citizens' policy buildup that followed, and to the counties where median